You blinked and another year disappeared. Sophie is looking at her phone calendar. It says December, but feels like January was last week. She tries to remember what she did this year. The months blur together. March, September, they all feel the same, like one long, continuous day that somehow lasted 12 months. She thinks back to when she's younger, how summer vacation felt endless, how a year felt like a lifetime. And now time just slides by, faster and faster, and she can't figure out where it's going. Here's what's actually happening. Time doesn't speed up, but your perception of it does. And that perception is based on how your brain processes memory. When you're young, every experience is a first. First day of school, first time riding a bike, first birthday party you remember. Your brain is encoding all of it, creating rich, detailed memories. And when you look back, those memories feel long, they feel full, because they're packed with new information. But as you get older, life becomes more routine. You've been to school hundreds of times. You've ridden a bike 1,000 times. You've had dozens of birthday parties. Your brain stops paying as much attention. It stops encoding every detail. Because it doesn't need to. It already knows what to expect. So it just files these experiences under same as before and moves on. Think of it like driving. The first time you're somewhere new, you're paying attention to everything. Every turn, every landmark, every street sign. The drive feels long because you're actively processing the whole experience. But after you've driven that route 50 times, you barely notice it. You zone out. You arrive, and you can barely remember the drive. It's like your brain was on autopilot. And that's exactly what happens with time. When your days are similar, when you're doing the same things over and over, your brain compresses them. It doesn't bother making distinct memories for each one. So when you look back, there's nothing there. No clear markers. No separation between Tuesday and Thursday. Between March and May. It all blends into one vague stretch of sameness. And that sameness feels short, because there's no depth to it. No texture. This is why vacations feel longer than regular weeks. Even if a vacation is only 3 days, it can feel like a week. Because you're doing new things, seeing new places, breaking your routine. Your brain is creating memories again. And those memories take up space. They make time feel full. But most of life isn't vacation. Most of life is routine. Wake up, eat, repeat, and your brain treats that routine like background noise. It's not worth remembering in detail. So it doesn't. And when you try to recall what happened this month, you draw a blank. Because your brain didn't save it. It just let it pass through. And the older you get, the more routine you have. The less novelty. The fewer firsts. So time feels like it's accelerating. Not because the days are shorter, but because the days are less memorable. And memory is what gives time its shape. Without memory, time collapses. It loses structure. It just becomes this rushing current that carries you forward without giving you anything to hold on to. There's also something called proportional theory. When you're 5 years old, 1 year is 20% of your entire life. That's huge. That's a massive chunk of your existence. So a year feels long. But when you're 50, 1 year is only 2% of your life. It's a tiny slice, and your brain processes it that way. It feels smaller. Less significant, because relative to everything you've experienced, it is. So each year feels shorter than the last, not because time is changing, but because your frame of reference is expanding. You're comparing each new year to a growing collection of all the years that came before. And the more years you have, the less weight each individual year carries. This is also why childhood feels like it lasted forever. Because when you were living it, those years were everything. They were your whole world. But now, Looking back, childhood might be a quarter of your life, or less. And your brain has condensed all those years into a few key memories. The rest has faded. So even though it felt long while you were in it, it feels short now. Because you're looking at it through the lens of everything that's happened since. And here's the uncomfortable part. This process doesn't stop. Time is going to feeling faster. Each year, each decade, will seem to pass more quickly than the one before. Not because you're doing anything wrong, because that's just how perception works when you're building on an ever-growing foundation of experience. But there's something else happening too. Something that makes modern life feel especially fast. And it's the amount of distraction. The constant input. The endless stream of content and notifications and updates. Your brain is processing so much information every day. But most of it isn't meaningful. Most of it doesn't create lasting memories. It's just noise. So you scroll for an hour and afterwards you can barely remember what you saw. You watched 10 videos, read 20 posts, looked at 100 images. But none of it stuck. None of it mattered enough to encode. So that hour just vanishes. It doesn't contribute to your sense of time. It's like it never happened. And when you add up all those empty hours, all those moments spent consuming things that don't leave a mark, you end up with days that feel like they disappeared. Weeks that you can't account for. Months where you're not sure what you actually did. Because you were busy, you were occupied, but you weren't creating memories, you were just passing time. And past time doesn't feel like. This is why people look back on years and feel like they wasted them. Not because they didn't do anything, but what they didn't feel significant, didn't feel worth remembering, so their brain didn't bother saving it. And now when they try to look back, there's just emptiness. Just a vague sense that time went by but nothing really happened. And that feeling is painful. Because it makes you wonder if you're living your life or if you're just letting it happen to you. If you're actually present or if you're sleepwalking through your days. And the faster time feels, the more urgent that question becomes. Because if years are going to keep vanishing like this, what does that mean for the rest of your life? There's also this thing where anticipation makes time feel longer. When you're looking forward to something, the time leading up to it stretches out. You're aware of each day, each hour, because you're counting down. You're waiting. And waiting makes time feel slow. But once the thing you were waiting for is over, that time collapses in memory. It compresses, and it feels like it went by in a flash. But if you're not anticipating anything, if every day is just another day, then time has no landmarks, no structure, no reason to slow down. So it doesn't. It just flows past. And you barely notice it's happening until it's gone. This is why people who are deeply unhappy or deeply stuck often say time is flying by. Not because they're having fun, but because they're not engaged. They're not creating memories, they're just enduring. And endurance doesn't register in the brain the same way experience does. So the time passes without leaving a trace. And it's not just big things that create memory, it's small things too. A conversation that made you think. A walk where you actually noticed your surroundings. Where you felt something real. Don't have to be dramatic. They just have to be present. They have to break through the routine enough for your brain to pay attention. But most people aren't living that way. They're in survival mode, going through the motions, getting through the day so they can get through the next day. And their brain is just logging all of that as more of the same. And more of the same doesn't take up space in memory. It just gets compressed into nothing. So what do you do about this? How do you slow down time when you're wired to speed it up? You create novelty. You break the routine. Not in huge ways, not by quitting your job and traveling the world, but in small, deliberate ways. You take a different route to work. You try something you've never done before. You pay attention to things you usually ignore. You have conversations that go deeper than surface level. You do something that makes today different from yesterday. Because different is what your brain remembers. Different is what creates the texture that gives time its shape. And the more different moments you create, the fuller your days feel. The fuller your days feel, the slower time seems to pass. Not in the moment, but in retrospect. And retrospect is what matters. That's how you measure your life. By what you remember. By what sticks. You don't need to make every day memorable. That's exhausting. That's impossible. But you need some days that stand out. Some weeks where something happened. Some months where you can point to a moment and say, that's when I felt alive. Time is going to keep moving. That part you can't control. But how you experience that movement, how much of it you actually remember, that's up to you. You can then let the years blur together into one undifferentiated mass. Or you can create enough distinct moments that when you look back, there's something there, something real. Something that proves you were here, that you were paying attention, that you weren't just passing through. The speed of time isn't the problem. The emptiness of it is, and you can fill that emptiness. One small, deliberate choice at a time, not by doing more, but by noticing more. By being here. Even just sometimes, because sometimes is enough. Sometimes is how you build a life that doesn't vanish the moment you try to remember it.